I will never forget the moment my own brother grabbed my daughter and slammed her head against the wall. That sound still echoes inside me like a nightmare that never ends. The entire hall went silent, frozen in disbelief as I screamed his name, but his eyes were cold and unrecognizable, filled with something darker than rage. People gasped, chaos broke out, and time seemed to stop around us. I thought the worst had already happened, until my brother took one more step, one that no one in that room would ever forget. Hello, my name is Sophie, and I'm 30 years old. I live in Denver, Colorado, with my husband Jacob and our 12-year-old daughter, Lily. From the outside, our life probably looks ordinary, the kind you might scroll past on a Sunday morning social feed without stopping. A modest house, a small backyard where Lily's bike leans against the fence, the smell of coffee and pancakes drifting through the kitchen on weekends. But beneath that quiet rhythm of normalcy, I carry a silence heavy enough to sink a heart, the silence of a daughter who never truly belonged to her own family. Every morning begins the same way. Jacob wakes up early for work, and I pack his lunch while Lily chatters about school. She's bright and full of life, with that same spark I once had before my mother's constant comparisons dulled it down. When she smiles, I see the version of myself that might have been, if only I had been loved the way she is. Growing up, I was always told to be more like Brandon. My younger brother, Brandon, was the golden child, the pride of our mother, Linda. If he spilled milk, she laughed and called him clumsy. If I forgot to do something, I was careless, ungrateful, or too emotional. It wasn't just favoritism, it was like she needed to remind me every day that I was second best. My father left when I was 9, and from that day forward, Linda's bitterness seemed to crystallize into something sharper, something cold. She poured every ounce of affection into Brandon and every ounce of blame into me. I remember one particular winter, when I was 15. I'd won an art competition at school. My painting was displayed in a local gallery. I came home expecting her to be proud. She didn't even look up from her crossword puzzle when I told her. Instead, she said, "That's nice, dear. But Brandon just made the basketball team. Isn't that wonderful?" That moment never really left me. It was like she took something pure and folded it into disappointment. Now, all these years later, that old ache still hums quietly beneath the surface. Sometimes I find myself checking my phone for messages that never come. No birthday wishes, no "how are you?" from my mother or brother. It's been almost 5 years since I last spoke to them. When my father passed away, I went to the funeral. Linda barely acknowledged me, but she clung to Brandon like he was her last hope. I left early that day, telling myself that I was done trying. Jacob knows all of this, of course. He's seen the tears I tried to hide when I thought Lily was asleep. He once told me, "Sophie, we can't choose the family we're born into, but we can build one better than the one we lost." And he was right. For a while, I managed to believe that love could heal the parts of me my mother broke. But trauma has a strange way of resurfacing when you least expect it. Sometimes a smell, a song, or even a phrase can pull you right back into a memory you thought you'd buried. Like when I hear someone say, "You're overreacting," and suddenly I'm 16 again, standing in our old kitchen, trying to explain why I'm crying while Linda rolls her eyes. Denver is a city that teaches you to appreciate calm, wide streets, quiet suburbs, snow that falls like forgiveness. But even here, peace can feel fragile when your past refuses to let go. I spend evenings reading on the couch, watching Lily draw, pretending that the emptiness inside me is just fatigue. But every now and then, when the wind rattles the windows, I catch myself whispering, "Why wasn't I enough?" I've learned to hide it well. To everyone else, I'm the mom who volunteers at school, bakes cookies, and smiles at the PTA meetings. But sometimes, when Jacob falls asleep beside me, I stare at the ceiling and wonder if Linda ever loved me, even once. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream anymore. It just sits quietly inside you, heavy and familiar, like old furniture you can't throw away. That's the pain I live with. The pain of being invisible to the people who should have seen me first. If you asked me a month ago, I would have said I'd finally made peace with it, that I'd built a new life and closed that old chapter for good. But I was wrong, because one chilly afternoon, as the autumn leaves began to fall across our porch, I opened my mailbox and found an elegant ivory envelope with gold trimming. It had my brother's name on it. Brandon and Amanda, you're invited. And just like that, the silence I'd carried for years began to tremble. The moment I saw Brandon's name on that envelope, my hands froze. It had been years since I'd seen anything that even hinted at him, or at my mother. The gold lettering shimmered under the sunlight, elegant, almost taunting. For a second, I just stood there on the porch, my breath caught halfway between surprise and disbelief. Jacob came out holding a mug of coffee. "What's that?" he asked. I hesitated. "An invitation," I said quietly. "Brandon's getting married." He stared at me for a moment, the way someone does when they're trying to gauge whether good news is actually good. "Are you serious?" "Yeah," I whispered, tracing my thumb over the embossed initials. "After all this time." Jacob sighed and leaned against the doorframe. "You don't owe them anything, Sophie." "I know," I said, though the truth was more complicated. I didn't owe them anything, but a part of me still longed for something from them. Recognition. Closure. Maybe even forgiveness for existing the way I did. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table, turning the invitation over and over. It was beautiful, white and gold, the kind of thing my mother would have chosen. The words "family is everything" were written at the bottom in looping cursive. I almost laughed at the irony. When Lily came into the room, she peeked at the card. "Who's getting married, Mom?" "Your Uncle Brandon," I said softly. Her eyes lit up. "You mean you have a brother? You never told me much about him." I forced a smile. "He lives far away. We haven't talked in a long time." Jacob put his hand over mine. "You don't have to go, sophomore. Not after everything they did to you." But that night, when everyone was asleep, I sat by the window, looking at the snowflakes starting to fall. There was something about the stillness of a night that reminded me of unfinished stories, chapters that never closed. Maybe this invitation wasn't just a formality. Maybe it was a sign that they were ready to fix things. Or maybe I just wanted to believe that. The next morning, I called the number written at the bottom of the card. A voice answered. "Hello." I froze. It was my mother. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said, flatly, "Sophie?" "Hi, Mom." My voice came out weaker than I expected. "I got the invitation." "Oh, yes. Brandon and Amanda are getting married next month. It's going to be a lovely ceremony." I waited for her to say something else. Maybe it would mean a lot if you came, or "I'm glad you called." But she didn't. So I asked, "Do you want us to come?" There was a pause long enough to make my chest ache. Then she replied, "It's up to you." Up to me. Those words had always been her way of saying she didn't care either way. Still, I found myself saying, "We'll be there." After the call ended, Jacob shook his head when I told him, "You're setting yourself up to get hurt again." "Maybe," I admitted. "But maybe not. Maybe it's time I faced them and stopped running." The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur. I bought a pale blue dress for Lily and a simple navy one for myself. Jacob looked handsome in his gray suit, though he wore the same uneasy look every time we talked about the trip. The day of the wedding arrived cold and bright. The church in downtown Denver was decorated with white roses and crystal chandeliers that sparkled under the morning light. Everything looked perfect, expensive, calculated, just like my mother liked things to be. When we stepped inside, I saw her instantly. Linda was standing near the altar, her silver hair pinned neatly, pearls around her neck, smiling for guests like a woman who'd never done a cruel thing in her life. Our eyes met for a brief second. Her smile faltered, but she didn't come over. Instead, she turned away, pretending to adjust the flowers. Jacob whispered, "You okay?" I nodded, though my throat felt tight. "Yeah, I expected this." Then, across the room, I saw Brandon. He was laughing with a few friends, his tuxedo crisp, his hair styled perfectly. He looked like the kind of man who'd never known struggle. When he saw me, his face froze for a moment before he forced a smile. "Well, look who decided to show up," he said, walking toward me. "Congratulations," I said quietly. "You look happy." "Of course I'm happy," he said, flashing that same smug grin I remembered from childhood. "Not everyone stays bitter forever." Jacob stepped closer to me, sensing my tension. But I ignored Brandon's jab. I just said, "I hope Amanda's a good woman. You deserve someone kind." Brandon chuckled. "Don't act like you know what I deserve." His words cut deep, but I stayed calm. I'd promised myself I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. As the ceremony began, I took a seat in the second row with Jacob and Lily. Watching the music start, the flowers sway, and Amanda walk down the aisle, I tried to remind myself why I came. Not for them, but for myself. To prove I was no longer the girl who needed their approval. Still, as Brandon slipped the ring onto Amanda's finger, I couldn't shake a strange feeling. Something about his expression didn't match the moment. His eyes flickered with unease, just for a second. It was subtle, so subtle that anyone else might have missed it. But I'd known him my whole life. And I knew that look. It was the same one he used to have whenever he was hiding something. I didn't know it then, but that flicker of guilt was about to shatter everything. The day after the wedding, the image of Brandon's uneasy smile kept replaying in my mind. It wasn't just nerves. It was guilt, the kind that lingers behind the eyes no matter how hard someone pretends. I'd seen that look before, years ago, when Brandon had lied to cover one of his messes. He always had a habit of gambling, not just with money, but with people's trust. When we were younger, he used to sneak into my mother's purse and take money to play poker with his friends. Once, he even took the rent cash, and when Mom found out, she blamed me for not watching him properly. I never forgot that day. It was like watching a thief become a prince in his mother's eyes. Back then, I thought his addiction would fade away with age. But as I learned later, some people never grow out of their habits. They just find bigger tables to play at. In the weeks following his wedding, stories about Brandon's debts began to reach me through relatives and old acquaintances. He'd borrowed money from coworkers, lost it at casinos, even tried day trading and failed miserably. Yet, my mother kept bailing him out, defending him, pretending he was just going through a phase. But something about this wedding didn't sit right. The lavish decorations, the diamond centerpiece, the luxury cars, all of it screamed money he didn't have. How could someone drowning in debt afford a wedding like that? I pushed those thoughts aside until one afternoon, when Lily came running into the living room holding her sketchbook.
"Mom,
"Look what I made," she said, showing me a drawing of the wedding. The big chandelier, the flower arrangements, and a shiny ring on the bride's hand. I smiled and kissed her forehead, but the sight of that ring pulled me back to a strange moment during the ceremony. When Brandon had taken out the box to put the ring on Amanda's finger, he'd hesitated, just for a second, as if expecting it not to be there. I remembered that flicker of fear again. A week later, an unexpected call came. "Mrs. Miller?" a man's voice said. "This is Mark Collins from Collins and Sons Jewelry in Denver. I believe you attended Brandon Parker's wedding." I froze. "Yes, I did. Why do you ask?" "I think there's something you should know. I shouldn't be calling you, but I've known your family a long time. I was friends with your father before he passed."
His voice softened.
"Brandon sold me the very ring he claimed to give Amanda." I felt my heart drop. "He what?" "He came into my shop 2 days before the wedding," Mr. Collins said. "Told me he needed to temporarily pawn the ring, said he'd buy it back in a week. He seemed desperate. I didn't know he'd still go through with the wedding." I pressed the phone harder against my ear, my pulse racing. "Does Amanda know?" "I don't think so," he replied. "But the truth will come out eventually. Especially since," he paused. "Especially since I saw your brother at the Denver casino that very same night. He lost nearly $5,000. My stomach turned. Brandon hadn't just lied. He'd gambled away the very symbol of his marriage. And knowing him, he'd find someone else to blame when the truth surfaced. That night, I sat in bed, unable to sleep. Jacob stirred beside me and asked, "You okay?" I handed him the phone, showing the call log. Mr. Collins called. He said, Brandon, pondering. Jacob blinked. You're kidding. I wish I were. He sighed. That explains a lot. I looked toward Lily's room. If he's capable of doing that, Jacob, what else is he capable of? Jacob wrapped an arm around me. You've spent your whole life trying to believe there's good left in them. But sometimes, Sophie, we have to accept that some people don't want to be saved. His words stayed with me long after he fell asleep. Over the next few days, I debated whether to tell Amanda. She seemed like a decent woman, shy and polite. I'd seen her at the wedding reception, quietly thanking the servers, smiling nervously whenever Brandon put his arm around her. She didn't deserve to start her life with a lie. But before I could decide what to do, fate made that choice for me. The following weekend, Brandon called me for the first time in years. Sophie, he said cheerfully, I just wanted to thank you for coming to the wedding. It meant a lot to Mom. His voice had that same oily charm that used to fool everyone but me. Cut to the point, Brandon. What do you want? I asked. He laughed lightly. Always so defensive. Look, I might need a small favor. I've got some temporary money issues, nothing serious. Just wondering if Jacob could help me out with a short loan. There it was. The truth, slipping through his polite words. The same cycle again. No, I said firmly. Not this time.
He scoffed. Wow.
Family really means nothing to you, huh? I bit back the anger rising in my throat. Funny, coming from the man who pawned his wife's ring for casino money. There was a pause. A long one. Then his voice dropped, low and threatening. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, but I do, I replied. And so does Mr. Collins. He hung up. That was the moment I realized this wasn't over. Brandon wasn't the kind of man who accepted exposure quietly. He'd lash out, twist the story, maybe even drag the innocent down with him, just like he always had. And when he did, I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly who his next target would be. My daughter. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that should have been filled with music, laughter, and clinking glasses, not screams and blood. The wedding reception was held at one of Denver's most elegant event halls, the kind with marble floors, chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls, and waiters who moved as silently as shadows. Jacob, Lily, and I arrived early, trying to blend in with the celebration. Amanda looked radiant in her gown, glowing with the kind of joy that made you want to believe in love again. For a brief moment, even I allowed myself to feel hope. Maybe, just maybe, Brandon had turned a corner. Maybe Mr. Collins had been mistaken or misled. But then I saw Brandon. He was jittery, his smile too wide, his laugh too forced. There was sweat on his brow despite the cool air conditioning. He kept glancing around as if searching for someone or something. I tried to ignore it, telling myself not to get involved, not again. But deep down, I knew that when Brandon was nervous, trouble was never far behind. The ceremony went smoothly. The guests clapped, and cameras flashed. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the ring ceremony. Brandon reached into his pocket and froze. His smile faltered. He patted his jacket once, then again, his movements growing frantic. Where the hell? He muttered under his breath. Amanda turned to him, confused. What's wrong? Brandon's voice rose, sharp enough to cut through the soft music. The ring. It's gone. A murmur spread through the hall. Guests looked at one another, whispering. Amanda's face paled. What do you mean gone? Brandon spun around, his eyes darting wildly. Someone took it. It was right here a minute ago. My heart sank. I'd seen that look before. The panic of a liar running out of room. He was staging it, pretending shock to hide his crime. Linda rushed forward, clutching her pearls. Oh my God. Who would steal at a wedding? Brandon's gaze swept across the room until it landed on the worst possible person, Lily. My little girl was standing near the dessert table, holding a small plate of cake, her eyes wide in confusion. Brandon pointed. You were near my things earlier. What were you doing there? The room fell silent. Every head turned toward Lily. My pulse roared in my ears. Brandon, stop it, I said, stepping forward. She's a child. She's a thief, he shouted. That's how your kind is, Sophie. Always taking what doesn't belong to you. My breath caught. My kind? You and your perfect little family. Always acting innocent while looking down on me. I stepped between him and Lily. You're insane. She didn't take anything. Lily's lip trembled. Uncle Brandon, I didn't. Shut up, he snapped, his voice echoing across the hall. The guests gasped. Amanda tried to calm him, touching his arm. Brandon, please. But he yanked his arm away, glaring at everyone like a cornered animal.
No.
She was near my table. I saw her. Linda, ever his loyal defender, shouted. Sophie, how could you let your daughter steal from her own family? She didn't. I yelled, my voice shaking. She didn't touch anything, Mom. You both are unbelievable. The argument spiraled into chaos. People whispered, some recording with their phones. Jacob moved closer, trying to take Lily's hand, but before he could reach her, Brandon lunged forward. He grabbed Lily by the arm. Tell the truth, you little liar. Let her go. I screamed, rushing to pull him off. Lily cried out in pain. Jacob shouted, Brandon, stop. But Brandon didn't stop. His rage boiled over. In one swift, horrifying motion, he grabbed Lily by the shoulders and slammed her head against the wall. The sound, that awful, hollow thud, silenced the room. Lily's body went limp and crumpled to the floor. I dropped beside her, my vision spinning. Lily, baby, look at me. Jacob knelt down, his hands shaking as he checked her pulse. She's breathing, he said, his voice tight. Call 911. Someone call 911 now. Amanda screamed. Guests rushed forward. Linda covered her mouth, whispering, Oh my God, over and over. And Brandon just stood there, panting, his hands trembling, his eyes wild with confusion. She shouldn't have, he stammered. You monster, I shouted, tears streaming down my face. You hurt her. Jacob's voice cracked as he looked up at him. You just assaulted a 12-year-old, Brandon. She could have died. Sirens echoed in the distance within minutes. Police officers stormed into the hall, followed by paramedics. Cameras flashed as bystanders filmed everything. I held Lily in my arms as the paramedics gently took her from me, strapping her to a gurney, her tiny face pale and motionless. One officer, Officer Grant, pulled Brandon aside. Sir, we need you to step away. Brandon tried to protest. It was an accident. I didn't mean. Officer Grant cut him off. Sir, witnesses say otherwise. You're under arrest for assaulting a minor. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Linda shouted, You can't do this. He's my son. Officer Grant turned to her with the calm professionalism of a man who'd heard it all before. Ma'am, your son just attacked a child in front of over 100 witnesses. You should be grateful she's alive. Amanda was crying quietly near the corner, her mascara streaked down her cheeks. She looked at Brandon with pure horror. Who are you? She whispered. When the officers led him away, Brandon turned toward me, eyes blazing with hate. You'll regret this, Sophie, he hissed. You always ruin everything. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was too busy watching Lily's ambulance pull away, its red lights flickering against the snowy sky. Jacob took my hand. His grip was firm but trembling. We're going with her. We followed the ambulance to Denver General Hospital. The ride felt endless. I kept hearing the echo of her head hitting the wall, over and over. My baby's scream, the thud, the silence afterward, they blended into one unbearable sound that refused to fade. At the hospital, the doctors rushed Lily into the emergency ward. We waited in the hallway for what felt like hours until finally a doctor came out. She's stable, he said. She has a mild concussion and needs rest, but she's going to be okay. I collapsed into Jacob's arms, sobbing with relief. When I looked up, I saw a uniformed officer standing nearby. Mrs. Miller, he said gently, we'll need a statement from you once you're ready. Multiple witnesses have already confirmed what happened. And there's video evidence too. We'll make sure justice is served. Justice. The word echoed in my head like a promise. But deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. Because Brandon wasn't just going to face the law, he was about to face the truth. And this time, there would be nowhere left for him to hide. I didn't sleep that night. The sound of the monitors in Lily's hospital room kept beeping in a steady rhythm, a sound that should have been comforting but only reminded me how close I'd come to losing her. I sat by her bedside, holding her small hand in mine, brushing strands of hair away from her face. The bruise on her forehead looked darker under the hospital light, and every time I looked at it, a shiver went through me. Jacob sat in the chair beside me, his head in his hands. "I still can't believe he did that," he whispered. I stared at Lily. "I can," I said quietly. "He's always been like this, cruel, reckless, but Mom made sure he never faced consequences. This time he went too far." Jacob lifted his head. "The police said they arrested him last night. They also took Linda in for questioning. She tried to interfere."
Of course she did.
My mother had always believed Brandon could do no wrong. Even now, she was probably twisting the story, claiming it was an accident, blaming everyone but him. But this time, it wouldn't work. There were witnesses. There were videos. And there was the one person Brandon hadn't expected to speak, Mr. Collins. The next morning, while Lily was still resting, I got a call from Officer Grant. "Mrs. Miller, good morning. We've reviewed the footage from the reception. Multiple guests confirmed what happened. But there's something else you need to know." "What is it?" I asked. "A man named Mark Collins came forward. Says he owns a jewelry shop in Denver. He claims Brandon pawned the wedding ring before the ceremony. He's already provided a statement." For a moment, I couldn't even respond. I just closed my eyes and whispered, "He finally got caught." Officer Grant continued. "Mr. Collins said Brandon came to his shop 2 days before the wedding. He was desperate, needed cash fast. Said he'd buy it back in a week, but never did. That explains why he panicked at the ceremony." The pieces clicked together perfectly. Brandon's nervousness, the fake accusation, the way he lashed out. He hadn't lost the ring. He'd sold it, then tried to cover his lie by blaming a 12-year-old girl. I thanked the officer for calling and hung up. Jacob looked at me. "Was that the police?" "Yes," I said, my voice trembling. "Mr. Collins told them everything. Brandon pawned the ring before the wedding." Jacob exhaled slowly. "Then it's over." But I knew it wasn't over yet. It wasn't enough for the truth to exist. It had to be seen, proven, undeniable. Later that afternoon, Officer Grant visited the hospital. He brought his notebook and a calm professionalism that made me feel, for the first time in years, that the law was actually on my side. "Mrs. Miller," he said, "we're preparing the formal charges: child assault, false accusation, obstruction, and fraud. Mr. Collins' statement supports everything you told us. Would you be willing to testify?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I want my daughter to know that no one, not even family, can get away with hurting her." When Officer Grant left, I looked at Lily, who had just begun to stir. She blinked groggily, then looked at me and whispered, "Mom, is Uncle Brandon in trouble?" I brushed her hair gently. "Yes, sweetheart. But don't worry, you did nothing wrong. Everyone knows that now." Tears welled in her eyes. "He said I stole it." My chest tightened. "I know, baby. But lies don't last forever." A few days later, the case reached the local news. "Businessman arrested after assaulting niece at his own wedding," the headlines read. Denver reporters ran the footage captured by guests, Brandon shouting, me trying to protect Lily, and the moment he pushed her. The video spread fast. Linda tried to hide from the cameras when she went to the courthouse, but even her polished smile couldn't save her this time. She looked smaller, older, stripped of that arrogance she'd carried all her life. When the preliminary hearing began, I sat in the courtroom beside Jacob, my palms sweaty, but my resolve unshakable. Lily stayed home with Jacob's mother. I didn't want her near that place. The prosecutor laid everything out with precision. Brandon Parker, age 32, accused of physical assault on a minor, attempting to conceal prior fraud, and fabricating a theft accusation to mislead witnesses. Brandon sat across the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, his hair messy, his jaw tight. He refused to look at me. Linda sat behind him, her face pale, her hands clasped in prayer. Then they called Mr. Collins to the stand. He adjusted his glasses and spoke clearly. 2 days before the wedding, Mr. Parker came to my shop. He said he needed cash urgently. He pawned the same diamond ring that he later claimed was stolen. The defense lawyer tried to interrupt. Are you sure it was the same ring? Mr. Collins didn't even blink. Absolutely sure. I have the paperwork, the serial number, and the surveillance footage from my shop. He even signed his name. A hush fell over the room. The prosecutor smiled faintly, then turned toward the jury. So, to be clear, the ring was never stolen. It was pawned by the defendant himself. Yes, Mr. Collins confirmed. And he lied about it in front of his entire family. When I took the stand, my hands trembled. I looked directly at the jury and spoke from the heart. I told them about the years of emotional abuse, the favoritism, and how Brandon's rage had always been excused by my mother. Then I told them about the wedding, the shouting, the accusations, and the moment he hurt Lily. Family should protect you, I said softly. But mine nearly destroyed me. And when he hurt my daughter, I knew the cycle had to end. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for truth. As I stepped down, I saw Amanda sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom, tears streaming down her face. She looked at me and mouthed, "Thank you." That was the moment I knew the tide had turned. Brandon's lies had collapsed, Linda's defense had crumbled, and the truth, solid, undeniable truth, stood tall in the center of the room. When the hearing ended, Officer Grant approached me outside the courthouse. "You did the right thing, Mrs. Miller. The DA's office will move forward with full charges. He won't get away this time." For the first time in my life, I felt something I'd never felt before when it came to my family, peace. The kind that doesn't come from forgiveness, but from justice finally catching up. The trial began 3 months later on a bright morning that felt strangely calm. Denver's courthouse stood tall against the winter sky, its glass windows glinting like mirrors, reflecting everything, hiding nothing. It felt symbolic somehow. The day Brandon's lies would finally face the light. I walked in holding Jacob's hand. The building smelled of paper, metal detectors, and nerves. Every step echoed with memories. My mother's voice blaming me for everything, Brandon's smirk when he got away with his wrongs, and the sound of Lily's cry as her head hit that wall. I wasn't here as the broken daughter anymore. I was here as a mother seeking justice. The courtroom was packed. Reporters sat in the back rows, their pens ready. Linda was there, dressed in muted gray, looking drained but still trying to appear dignified. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Amanda sat a few rows behind, alone, wearing a simple black dress. Her face looked hollow, like she hadn't slept in weeks. Brandon entered with 2 guards by his side, handcuffed. His once perfect hair was messy, his face pale. For the first time in my life, he didn't look untouchable. He looked small, a man trapped in the consequences of his own arrogance. When he glanced at me, there was no remorse, only resentment. The kind of hate that grows from pride, not guilt. The judge, Honorable Judge Miller, began the session. "We are here for the case of Brandon Parker versus the state of Colorado on charges of assault on a minor, fraud, and false accusation." The prosecutor laid out the evidence piece by piece. The wedding footage, eyewitness testimonies, and Mr. Collins's documents proving the ring was pawned. Everything aligned perfectly. The truth was airtight. Then came the moment the courtroom hushed, when Mr. Collins was called again to testify.
He spoke calmly.
The defendant pawned the ring on December 17th, just 2 days before his wedding. He told me he needed quick cash to settle personal debts. I have the receipt signed by him and security footage from my shop. The defense tried to argue that Brandon had planned to redeem the ring later, but the prosecutor swiftly countered. Then why accuse a 12-year-old child of theft? Why lie to over 100 witnesses if there was no guilt? Brandon's attorney hesitated. He had no answer. When it was my turn to testify, I felt my hands trembling, but my voice came out steady. My brother has spent his whole life lying his way out of trouble, I said. But this time, his lies hurt an innocent child, my daughter. She still wakes up at night from nightmares. She asks me if he's coming back. How do you explain to a 12-year-old that the man she called uncle tried to destroy her just to hide his own shame? I glanced toward Brandon. He stared straight ahead, jaw tight, pretending not to hear. Then Amanda was called to the stand. She looked fragile, but when she spoke, her voice carried quiet strength. I didn't know about the ring until after the wedding, she said. I found out when I visited Mr. Collins to resize it. He told me it had been pawned. I confronted Brandon, and he admitted it. Said he was desperate. Said I'd never understand. He told me I should be grateful he married me at all. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even Linda's face twisted with shock. Amanda's eyes filled with tears, but she kept going. When I saw what he did to that little girl, I knew my marriage was over. I filed for divorce 2 weeks later. Brandon finally broke his silence. You betrayed me, he shouted. You're all liars. The judge banged the gavel. Mr. Parker, control yourself or you'll be removed. Brandon's voice cracked with fury. This is all her fault. He pointed at me. She's been jealous since we were kids. She made me look like a monster. For the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. I met his gaze calmly and said, You didn't need my help for that, Brandon. You did that all by yourself. The courtroom went silent again. When closing arguments began, the prosecutor's words echoed through the hall. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. Today, the law will remind Mr. Parker that no amount of family favoritism or denial can protect him from the truth. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned with the verdict. The foreperson stood. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts. I felt the breath leave my body. It was over. Finally, after years of silence and injustice, the truth had a voice, and it spoke loud enough for the world to hear. The judge looked at Brandon. Mr. Parker, you are hereby sentenced to 4 years in state prison for child assault, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Additionally, you will pay restitution to the victim's family and attend mandatory rehabilitation for gambling addiction. Linda broke down sobbing in the back row. But even then, I saw no regret in her tears, only humiliation. Amanda stood quietly, clutching her divorce papers. When the guards led Brandon away, she whispered, Goodbye. He didn't look back. After court adjourned, Officer Grant approached me. It's done, Mrs. Miller. He'll serve real time. I nodded, my throat tight. Thank you. Outside the courthouse, snow began to fall softly, blanketing the steps in white. Jacob put his arm around me. You did it, he said. You broke the cycle. I looked up at the gray sky. No, I whispered. We did. For Lily. Justice doesn't erase the pain, but it gives it meaning. And in that moment, I finally felt the weight I'd carried since childhood begin to lift, slowly, gently, like the first snow melting in spring. It's been almost a year since that day in court, and life finally feels still again. Not silent like before, but peaceful. The kind of peace that doesn't come from pretending everything's fine, but from surviving what wasn't. Denver feels different now. The same streets I used to walk in a fog of worry seem brighter, more open. I drive Lily to school every morning, and she hums along to songs on the radio, her laughter echoing through the car. The bruise on her forehead has long faded, but sometimes, when I catch her tracing the spot absent-mindedly, I realize some wounds don't show on the skin. Jacob has been my anchor through it all. We've learned that healing isn't loud. It's the quiet moments of trust rebuilt one day at a time. There are still nights when I wake up from dreams of the wedding hall, of Brandon's voice, of the sound of that awful impact. Jacob always pulls me close and says, You're safe, sophomore. It's over now. And for the first time in my life, I believe him. Linda hasn't tried to contact me since the trial. I heard she spends most of her time alone now, avoiding neighbors and church friends. Sometimes I think about her, about the woman who taught me how to tie my shoes, then taught me what it means to live without love. I don't hate her anymore. Pity maybe, but not hate. People like her live trapped in the cages they build themselves. Brandon is still in prison. His sentence was firm, and his name occasionally appears in small local headlines about rehabilitation programs. I used to wonder if he ever thought about what he did about Lily, but I've stopped asking questions that will never have answers. His life is his consequence, and I've finally learned to let go of his shadow. Last week, Lily came home with a certificate from school, Outstanding Art Student of the Year. She'd painted a sunrise over the Denver skyline, the colors blending from soft pink into gold. She said it was called New Dawn. When she handed it to me, I couldn't speak for a while. Because in that painting, I saw everything we'd been through. The pain, the fear, the breaking, and the light that followed. That night, as I watched her sleep, I whispered, "You'll never have to carry what I did." I stepped out onto our porch, the same one where the story began, and looked at the city lights glowing beneath the stars. The air was cold, but kind. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something bad to happen. I felt free. My name is Sophie Miller, and for the first time in my life, I'm not defined by what my family took from me, but by what I chose to rebuild. A new dawn has come, and this time it's mine. Thank you for staying with me through my story. If my journey touched your heart, show your love by liking, sharing, and letting me know in the comments what part stayed with you the most. I'd love to hear your thoughts and lessons from this chapter of truth and courage. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications, because the next story is already on its way, and it's one you won't want to miss.